Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So, how do you feel about getting in a relationship with someone who already has a child? So, you know, male or female, right? How do you feel about getting into a relationship with someone who already has a child? So, leave your in the comments down below. Let me know how you feel about that. And for those of you who have actually been in that situation, or you're currently in a situation where you got into a relationship with someone who has a kid, or who has multiple kids. How did you deal with that? How did you deal with the whole dynamic of you know uh, being that person's stepdad or stepmom, or whatever the situation is? So leave in the comments below, and let me know how you've handled that situation, if you've actually been in that situation before, or if you're currently in a relationship where you've stepped into that role. Leave in the comments below. Let us all know how you, particularly how you handled that situation. That's what we're going to talk about today. So, look, it is, without any doubt, it's a really tricky, really, really tricky situation. Walking into a situation where you are, you know, going to be a step parent. And a lot of people are really not comfortable with it, all right? Just to be honest, a lot of people are really not comfortable walking into a situation like that where they're going to be the step parent, because one of the things, and there's so many issues, and I'm going to try to see how many of them I'll go through today, but they'll definitely be a follow up, part two or part three or whatever, to this particular video. But um, it's really interesting, all the different circumstances that you walk into when you put yourself in a situation where you're dating someone who has kids. Because one of the first things you've got to take into consideration now is, what role do you play, right? So what is your role? Is Are you a step parent, like fully on board as a step parent once? And this is once you've gotten serious in the relationship with the person that has kids, right? This is once you are really serious and you've walked into that situation where the person has kids. So are you full on going to be a step parent? And that's something that you got to think about. Or do you kind of operate behind the scenes? You're not really actively involved in taking care of the child, but I mean, you would look out for the child, so to speak, if that makes sense. You'll look out for them, if they need something and you can help, or whatever the case is, but you don't primarily take over the responsibility of being a parent, a step parent, because you kind of just, you want to leave yourself out of that. And that's something else. That's one of the things you've got to decide. As a matter of fact, it's probably the first thing, besides obvious, whether or not you want to get into a relationship with someone who has kids. That would be the next thing that you have to try to understand. And so this is where communication really comes into the relationship, because now you and the person who has, the child, you really have to talk about what role you're going to play, so that there are boundaries, right? Because I believe in, you really got to establish boundaries early on in any circumstance, any situation. And so now you and this person have to actually sit and decide, well, what are the boundaries that we're going to set here? For example, are you going to be in a position where you are going to be required, uh, and it is going to be accepted that you are able to discipline the child? Because that could be a huge thing, right? Are you going to be playing that role, right, where not only are you just kind of like looking out for the child, or whatever the case is, but that you are actually one of those people, all right? You can actually discipline the child, and that could become, if anyone has ever been in that situation, if you you know that could be one of those really tricky things because on one hand, this is why I said this is a conversation you have to have with the person who has the kids. Do you go to them and tell them what the child is doing, and they will take care of all of anything with you know as far as discipline is concerned? So all you're doing is reporting what you see or what you hear, but you are not going to actively discipline the child, right? In other words, you're not going to hit the child or put the child in timeout or whatever the case is. That is not your responsibility or your role. And it might sound silly, but these are things that you have to talk about. These are things that you have to talk about in a lot of the life coaching and stuff that I've done. I've realized that this is something that really comes up. You really gotta you you gotta anticipate things, and if you can anticipate it, then it should probably be discussed up front, so that you kind of have a pathway in terms of how you're gonna deal with this particular issue going forward. And disciplining a child is one of those really tricky things because sometimes you hear people say, "Well, I don't want you to hit my child." Well, don't hit my child. Oh, I don't like the way you disciplined my child, or whatever the case is, that type of stuff, right? I mean, it's so all that dynamic now plays out in in the relationship. And so are you going to be one of those people who discipline, or are you one of those people who report? That's something you got to take into consideration. And if you're allowed to discipline, what type of discipline, right? That's the other thing. People come from different cultures, and so you might be getting into a relationship with someone who's from a culture where they believe that the getting the switch or the belt or whatever the case is an appropriate form of discipline. And then you might be in a relationship with the other person from a different cultural upbringing who believes otherwise, in timeout or whatever the case is. And these are all things that a lot of times people don't think about, but they're really relevant, and you have to think about them. You have to talk about them because they could cause more problems in your relationship. So, what might be a problem with disciplining the child could actually turn out to be a larger problem in the relationship because you never discussed things that were really, really important up front. So, a lot of times people don't think about stuff like that, but it could become a big thing, right? So, who's going to discipline the child? That's something you got to take into consideration. Now, then there also has to be a conversation with the child as well, right? So now the person who's the parent has to be able to talk to the kids, right? Has to talk to them and maybe have some kind of family meeting or whatever the case is, and kind of establish that this person is not just here, but this person is your step parent, step mom, step dad, whatever the case is. And so this person, this is the role that they're going to be playing in your life. Now, obviously, it depends on the age of the child, the type of conversation that you're going to have with them. The older the child is, the more interesting this whole idea of discipline is probably going to be. But maybe it's also going to be easy to have a conversation with them because they're older, right? And the younger they are, maybe there still needs to be some type of conversation depending on whether or not they could really kind of understand and comprehend fully what is going on as far as that dynamic is concerned. But again, that's something that has to be taken into consideration when you've got people walking into a situation like that. Like, who's going to do the discipline? Who's going to handle all types of discipline when it comes to how you're going to look out for the child in that way, and teach them right from wrong, and then having that conversation with the child to let them know this is the role that this person is going to play in their life. Look, it's a really interesting and dynamic type of situation to walk into, right? So I'm going to leave it here for today. Just let me know what you think. There's going to be a part 2 to this where I'm going to get a little bit more into this whole idea of being in a relationship with someone who has a child. But don't forget, leave your comments down below. Let us know if you've ever been in that situation, if you're currently in that situation, and how you handled it, right? Don't forget to subscribe. Please turn on your post notifications because I post almost every single day. And also, don't forget to share and hit the like button. Those two things really help the channel grow, and I'll really appreciate it if you do that. So, thank you again for watching, and until next time, peace.